Controversy of the guns. Hello and welcome to my video about guns, firstly calling the history with some events and then I will talk about the real argument. The history. The first guns, known as fire lances, were invented in China in the 9th century AD. These early weapons were essentially bamboo or metal tubes filled with gunpowder and shrapnel, which were ignited by a fuse and propelled forward. These fire lances were used in warfare to disorient and injure enemy soldiers. Over time, guns evolved into more sophisticated weapons. In the 14th century, hand cannons were developed, which were essentially metal tubes that could be held by one hand and fired from the shoulder. These hand cannons were the first firearms to use gunpowder to propel a metal ball, rather than shrapnel. The next major advancement in gun technology came in the 16th century with the invention of the matchlock musket. The matchlock was the first gun to have a trigger and a firing mechanism, making it easier and quicker to fire. These muskets were used by armies throughout Europe and played a significant role in the 30 Years' War, which lasted from 1618 to 1648. In the 19th century, guns became even more advanced with the invention of the revolver and the repeating rifle. The revolver, first patented in 1836 by Samuel Colt, was the first firearm that could fire multiple rounds without needing to be reloaded. The repeating rifle, such as the Winchester Model 1866, could fire multiple rounds before needing to be reloaded, making it a popular choice for hunters and soldiers alike. Throughout history, guns have been used for various purposes, including hunting, self-defense, and warfare. In the Middle Ages, hunters used guns to hunt large game, such as deer and wild boar. During the colonization of America, guns were used for both hunting and self-defense against Native Americans and wild animals. In modern times, guns are primarily used for self-defense, hunting, and recreation, but also play a significant role in military and law enforcement operations. The issue of gun control has been a contentious issue in American politics and society for many years. On one hand, there are those who argue that the right to bear arms is a fundamental right protected by the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. On the other hand, there are those who argue that the proliferation of guns in society has led to a rise in gun violence and that stricter gun control measures are needed to protect public safety. From a historical perspective, the right to bear arms has been enshrined in the U.S. Constitution since its inception. The Second Amendment, which was ratified in 1791, states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. However, the interpretation of this amendment has been the subject of much debate over the years. Proponents of stricter gun control measures point to the fact that the U.S. has one of the highest rates of gun violence in the developed world. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there were 43,559 incidents of gun violence in the U.S. in 2020, resulting in 19,379 deaths and 24,180 injuries. This includes mass shootings, homicides, and suicides. On the other hand, supporters of the right to bear arms argue that gun ownership is a crucial component of personal liberty and self-defense. They point to examples such as the 1992 Los Angeles riots, where Korean shopkeepers used firearms to defend their businesses against looters and arsonists. One interesting historical fact is that the U.S. has not always had such lax gun control laws. The National Firearms Act of 1934, for example, imposed a tax on the sale of certain types of firearms, including machine guns and sawed-off shotguns. The Gun Control Act of 1968, which was enacted in response to the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, prohibited the sale of firearms to convicted felons and individuals with mental illness. Another interesting story is the case of the District of Columbia versus Heller, which was a landmark Supreme Court case in 2008. The case centered around the interpretation of the Second Amendment and whether it protected an individual's right to own a firearm for self-defense. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that the Second Amendment did indeed protect an individual's right to own a firearm for self-defense. In conclusion, guns have evolved significantly over time, from the basic fire lances of ancient China to the sophisticated firearms of modern times. While their purpose and use have changed over the centuries, guns have remained an important tool for humans throughout history. Fights. Throughout history, there have been several famous guns and gunfights that have captured the public's attention. Here are a few examples. The shootout at the OK Corral. The gunfight at the OK Corral occurred in Tombstone, Arizona, in 1881. It was a 30-second shootout between lawmen and a group of outlaws, including the infamous Earp brothers and Doc Holliday. The gunfight resulted in 3 outlaws dead and 3 lawmen injured. It became famous through books, movies, and TV shows. The shootout had a significant impact on public perception of guns and gunfights. It further romanticized the idea of the Wild West and gunslingers, and popularized the idea of the quick draw shooting. The assassination of John F. Kennedy. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 is one of the most infamous shootings in American history. Kennedy was riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas when he was shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. The assassination had a significant impact on gun laws in the United States. It led to the passage of the Gun Control Act of 1968, which regulated the sale and possession of firearms. The assassination also had a profound impact on public perception of guns. Many people began to associate guns with violence and tragedy, rather than the idea of self-defense or hunting. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred in 1929 in Chicago, Illinois. It was a gangland shooting that resulted in the deaths of 7 members of the North Side Gang, led by Bugs Moran. The massacre had a significant impact on public perception of guns and gang violence. It fueled the public's interest in the Prohibition era and the gangsters who dominated it. The event also helped lead to the creation of the FBI's Organized Crime Unit, which was tasked with cracking down on organized crime and gang violence. These events show how guns and gunfights have played a significant role in shaping public perception in gun laws throughout history. While guns have been romanticized in some cases, they have also been associated with tragedy and violence in others. As a result, the debate over gun control and the role of guns in society remains a contentious issue to this day. Arguments. Arguments for gun ownership. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects the right to bear arms. Guns are necessary for self-defense and personal protection. Gun ownership is a form of liberty and personal freedom. Guns are important for hunting, sports shooting, and other recreational activities. Arguments for gun control. Gun violence is a significant problem and stricter regulation is necessary to reduce it. Guns are too easily accessible to criminals, children, and those with mental illness. The availability of guns leads to more accidents, suicides, and homicides. Stricter gun control laws can help prevent mass shootings and other acts of violence. The debate over gun control has been fueled by the impact of gun violence on society. The use of guns in mass shootings, gang violence, and domestic disputes has led to numerous tragedies and has caused many to call for stricter regulation. In response, various efforts have been made to prevent gun violence, including background checks for all gun purchases, restrictions on the sale and ownership of certain types of firearms, such as assault weapons, banning the sale of guns to those with a history of domestic violence or mental illness, increased penalties for gun crimes and illegal firearm possession, improved education and awareness about gun safety. While some argue that these measures infringe on individual rights, others argue that they are necessary to prevent further tragedies and keep communities safe. In my view, while the right to bear arms is an important aspect of individual liberty, it is also important to recognize that the proliferation of guns in society has led to a rise in gun violence. Therefore, I believe that stricter gun control measures, such as universal background checks and a ban on assault weapons, are necessary to protect public safety. I can provide information on both sides of the argument regarding gun control laws. Those who support stricter gun control laws argue that it would help prevent gun-related deaths and injuries. They believe that it would be beneficial to have measures such as background checks, waiting periods, and age restrictions. The purpose of these measures is to ensure that firearms are kept out of the hands of individuals who are not legally allowed to own them, such as criminals or individuals with a history of mental illness. On the other hand, those who oppose stricter gun control laws argue that they would infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens to own firearms. They argue that such laws would not be effective in reducing gun violence and would only serve to restrict the rights of responsible gun owners. It's worth noting that there are many different types of gun control laws, and not all of them are equally controversial. For example, most people agree that individuals who are convicted of violent crimes or who have been diagnosed with mental illness should not be allowed to purchase firearms. Overall, the issue of gun control is complex and multifaceted. It involves weighing the need to protect individual rights against the need to protect public safety. There is evidence to suggest that gun control measures can be effective in reducing gun violence. For example, countries with stricter gun control laws generally have lower rates of gun-related deaths and injuries compared to countries with more permissive gun laws. Additionally, states within the United States that have stricter gun control laws tend to have lower rates of gun-related deaths and injuries compared to states with more permissive laws. Some of the specific gun control measures that have been shown to be effective in reducing gun violence include background checks, waiting periods, and restrictions on certain types of firearms or ammunition. These measures can help prevent firearms from falling into the hands of individuals who are not legally allowed to own them, such as criminals or individuals with a history of mental illness. However, it's important to note that gun control measures alone may not be enough to completely eliminate gun violence. There are many complex factors that contribute to gun violence, including socioeconomic issues, mental health, and access to firearms through illegal means. Therefore, a comprehensive approach to reducing gun violence may include not only gun control measures but also addressing these underlying factors. Overall, while gun control measures may not completely eliminate gun violence, they can be an important part of a larger strategy to reduce it. Is gun control necessary to reduce violences? Should there be a stricter gun control laws? Thanks for watching. If this video was informative to you, like and comment your thoughts about it. At the end of the video, the issue of gun ownership and gun control is complex and highly controversial. The impact of gun violence on society cannot be ignored, and efforts to prevent further tragedies will continue to be a contentious issue for the foreseeable future.